Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for the sixth episode in our AI Talks, a Patrick J. McGovern Foundation live stream series that's engaging the civil society and nonprofit champions who are really representing our human interests and aspirations in an AI-driven world. I'm particularly excited about this conversation today with our exceptional guest, whom I will introduce momentarily, and I'm sure many of you are as well. If, like us, you've been sort of closely following the visible and projected impacts of AI on the future of work, especially from the lens of a nonprofit or other social impact institution, I'm sure you're wondering how AI will affect the communities you support. I hope that this episode will leave you inspired to sort of start reflecting on how you're currently approaching AI as a tool for the workplace, what it really means to be AI empowered and future ready, and why AI isn't something to run from, but rather something to embrace in a way that is responsible, courageous, and community informed. Our conversation today will specifically look at the role that AI plays in supporting workforce development initiatives that promote the dignity of work, the right to job security and stability, and how nonprofits can leverage AI to really protect and empower marginalized communities as they navigate a shifting labor market. I know our guest shares the same conviction that we at the foundation apply to every aspect of our work, that inclusion should form the cornerstone of a responsible AI strategy, and that every unique identity should be respected, welcomed, and celebrated in the workplace, a particularly important topic as we enter Pride Month. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce our guest, Connor Schoen. Connor is the co-founder and executive director of Breaktime, a Massachusetts-based nonprofit that is working to break the cycle of young adult homelessness through transitional employment support. As an emerging leader in the nonprofit world, he has a deep passion for empowering young people with the opportunities and support they need to reach their full potential. He has been recognized as a Forbes 30 Under 30 for social impact, is a member of the board of the National Youth Employment Coalition, where he advocates for federal funding of youth employment programs, and his work has been featured in national outlets including CBS, In the Know, and Classy. Connor earned an honors degree in applied mathematics and economics at Harvard University, which empowers him to bring a data-informed and quantitative approach to the design and evaluation of the programs he builds at Breaktime. And for those of you who don't know me yet, my name is Yolanda Botti-Lodovico. I use she, her pronouns, and I recently expanded my role from policy and advocacy lead here at the Patrick J. McGovern Foundation to storytelling and advocacy lead. By training, I'm a policy expert, human rights advocate, writer, and communicator who's focused on highlighting the aspirations and achievements of leaders in communities like Connor who are leveraging AI to solve some of the greatest challenges we face today. A quick overview of the Patrick J. McGovern Foundation, for those of you who are not aware, is a philanthropy uniquely dedicated to advancing data and AI solutions to empower communities and support changemakers in the face of global challenges. And through our work, we have the great privilege of working with innovators like Breaktime. So Connor, back to you. As an organization focused on tackling the complex challenge of youth homelessness, tell me about Breaktime's mission and your unique approach to empowering youth through inclusive workforce development programs.
Well, thank you so much for having me, Yolanda. And I'm so honored to be a partner of the Patrick J. McGovern Foundation and a dear friend of the foundation's work. So in terms of Breaktime, I started Breaktime back in 2018 with the mission of equipping young people with the job and financial security they need to obtain and maintain housing security. So we take a really unique approach to workforce development because we're focused on young people who are experiencing housing insecurity, specifically 18 to 24-year-olds. So niche population that often can't maintain housing because they don't have the right job and financial supports, but also struggle in other workforce programs because housing is such a barrier to being able to show up to work on time, being able to be present at your job, having the ability to go through a training program that might not be paid or go to school. And so I started Breaktime with that aim of equipping young people with job and financial security. And what we do is we have a 3-part program that starts with 3 weeks of work readiness training, then 3 months of a paid job placement at another business or nonprofit, and then 3 years of continued wraparound support. So we equip young people with the skills they need to succeed in a variety of different industries, actually any different industry, Our training is focused on the soft skills you need to succeed in the workforce. And we partner with many other workforce development agencies and educational institutions that help with the hard skills, the industry specific knowledge that you need to succeed in your dream job. So that's break time in a nutshell. And we're so excited to be here. And I'm so excited to be having this conversation.
Awesome. Thank you, Connor. And the excitement is shared. I would love to talk a little bit more about, before we sort of jump into the topic for today, which is workforce readiness and how AI can actually serve as an important ingredient to prepare youth to feel empowered to succeed in a shifting labor market. But we're also having this conversation during a very important month, and that's Pride Month. So I'd love for you to share a little bit more about your own personal journey and what led to your vision for Breaktime.
Of course. So when I started Breaktime back in 2018, I was actually just a freshman at Harvard. I'd grown up in Westborough, Massachusetts, and had been connected to the service ecosystem my whole life through an incredible organization called Project 351. And at a young age, at just 19, I knew that I wanted to pursue a career in the nonprofit world. But I was really struggling with my own journey and my sexuality and my own identity. And so Pride Month is always a time where I reflect on the journey I've gone through over the last 6+ years since I came out. Uh, and the start of that journey was actually when I was working at the Y Youth Shelter at Harvard, working with young adults experiencing homelessness ages 18 to 24, 40% of whom are LGBTQ plus. So I was working with young people who, despite everything going on in their lives, were so brave and authentic about who they were, who brought that to the shelter every day, and who inspired me to embrace myself, embrace who I was, embrace the parts of me that I didn't initially want to embrace or felt scared of or felt ashamed of. And because of that experience and because of my exposure to incredible young people over the last 6 years, I have gone through a really incredible journey of becoming more prideful about who I am, more visible in the way I bring my identity into the world, and just more authentic to what really makes me me at my core. So pride is so important to me. This month is so important to me. And LGBTQ plus inclusion is very much stitched into everything about Breaktime's mission and my passion for our mission.
That's wonderful. Thank you, Connor, so much for sharing your story. And as I mentioned, it really is a great honor for us at PJMF to be able to share a bit about your leadership and continued advocacy for the LGBTQ plus community, but also other marginalized identities that are already contributing so much to our society and to the future of AI. And we will get into that later in the conversation. But I want to take it back to sort of this topic for today. It's clear to many of us that AI, especially generative AI, is creating new hype and real changes in the labor market that are bringing a mix of emotions from excitement to fears, all of which are very valid, right? And as a result, the demands that are placed on job seekers and those engaged in workforce development programs are really shifting. So at PJMF, we have this sort of critical focus on building broad-based AI literacy and fluency that goes beyond just teaching folks how to code or getting them prepared to take on that next fancy role in big tech, but really to have the foundational understanding that they need to effectively navigate the various AI tools that are available to them, both in the workplace and beyond. But on the other side of the conversation is the access piece. So I imagine many of the individuals that you work with, especially younger people in precarious positions, are affected by the digital divide. They don't have access to sort of AI and digital training opportunities. They experience discrimination on the basis of sexual orientation, race, gender, and other factors that sort of compound the discrimination that they're already experiencing in the workplace. So I'd love to hear from you how you're seeing these challenges play out in your own line of work and how you're really addressing them.
Yeah. Thank you for the question. This is so central to everything that we are thinking about because the world is changing so rapidly. We're all experiencing it. Every day an app that we've used for years suddenly has new features that are using AI. We're seeing AI pop up in commercials. We're seeing this phenomenon with Chat GPT and its usage. And so it's on everyone's minds. And it's incredibly impactful in the space of workforce development because it can change the entire labor market. And so we are very much thinking about this at Breaktime. And I'm going to share a couple pieces about our approach to ensuring that young people are included in this revolution in AI. And number one is that Breaktime's focus has been and always remains the soft skills that a young person needs to succeed in any job. Technology will continue to change. Labor market trends will continue to change. The fastest growing industry in Boston will continue to change. And we know that. And we know that the interests of our young people will continue to change. The job that they want to do in their 20s might not be the job they want to do in their 30s. So we want them to have the ability to show up on time, be engaged in the workplace, learn on the job, and assess what they want from their career. In the first 3 weeks of your time with Breaktime, you get to engage in all of that. You engage in job skills training that's focused on what we call the 6 essentials for success in the workplace. You get to do a career pathways project where you explore a career path that you want to learn more about. The result may be that you say, actually, I don't want to do this career, but it gives you the skills to say, what does it look like to actually explore the viability of my path in a certain career? What are the educational requirements? What is the salary? And so as AI affects the workforce, we know that it's going to affect so much about where there are jobs, where there are good paying jobs. And we want our associates to be prepared to pivot and make changes all throughout their careers. And so at Breaktime, while we're partnered with many hard skills training programs, we're focused on the soft skills that are going to give young people a leg up in navigating those changes that will happen all throughout their lives as they continue to pivot towards where there's opportunity and where there's opportunity for them to actually make a family sustaining wage. So I'd say first and foremost, that fundamental element of our approach, the fact that we're sort of industry agnostic, allows us to prepare young people for whatever is to come. And we all know that there's so much uncertainty out there. And so having that ability to adapt, to assess different career options, to explore how to actually achieve success in those careers, and have the job skills to actually show up and be engaged every day is, I think, the number one most impactful thing we're doing. And through partnerships with other organizations, we're connecting young people with more hard skill technological programs. They're equipping them with the skills that they need to succeed in the future of this digital revolution. And so while we're not experts at being able to coach and train those skills, we're leveraging partnerships with those who are and really specializing in the soft skills that are going to be needed for all the other reasons that I mentioned.
Yeah, I think that's awesome, Connor. And we were just having a conversation internally today about how many careers, even absent the existence of AI, many careers are not a sort of linear trajectory. You take pivots, you decide to move in different directions, and that's a beautiful thing. And I think what really brings value to the workplace is the ability to bring your creativity, your vision, your willingness to learn and grow. And part of that is learning new skills like AI. And what I also love about what you mentioned is that you haven't gotten super far into the sort of integrating AI into your workforce development programs, but this is something that's on the horizon. So it's sort of an encouraging factor for those of the audience who are tuning in today who may not have taken that step yet, but are thinking about it. So I'd love to hear from you how you sort of see your efforts evolving over time as AI becomes a more and more critical ingredient in the workplace. How do you see your efforts evolving over time to sort of support the communities that are transitioning into this new labor market?
Yeah, one of Breaktime's core values is collaborative innovation. We believe that the most effective and transformative social change occurs when organizations and people work together in a way that really harnesses each individual or organization's superpowers
Mm.
and doesn't reinvent the wheel over and over again across the board. And what I mean by that is, look, we're not at Breaktime, we're not experts in AI. We're not experts in hard skill training around technological careers, but we have incredible partners who are. And so we lean in terms of your question, we're going to lean deeper and deeper into our specialty, which is preparing young people for whatever is to come, preparing them with the job skills they need to show up on time, be engaged, learn on the job, succeed on the job, have confidence on the job. We're empowering them with the financial resources, the savings, the credit that they need to secure long-term stable housing and to have stability so that they can actually invest time and energy in their careers, but also educational opportunities that can advance their technological skill set. And so we see our role as being consistent in this ecosystem, and we want to keep harnessing that role and keep improving it. I think our values have always steered us away from trying to become experts in something we're not, because the power of partnership is that an organization that's an expert in AI and preparing people for new careers in the digital revolution can do that really well. Well, Breaktime makes sure that that the young person actually shows up to that program, makes sure they stay engaged in that program, make sure they have the stability and wraparound support to succeed in that program. And so we're very mindful of what our specific role in all of this is. And while we're not directly training young people around AI or training young people around hard skill sets, hard technological skill sets, we're making sure that they can show up and do that in other environments, and that they know how to navigate exploring different career options that might require those skills. So yeah, that's how we really think of programmatically about our role here. And then as an organization overall and on the back end, we're really thinking about how to harness AI and experimenting with different ways of harnessing AI to really improve our work. What's so great is, a lot of the softwares and technologies we use are starting to integrate these tools and make it really easy for organizations like us to leverage them to improve our work and to enhance our impact. There's, of course, danger with that, which we'll talk about more today in the conversation. But what we're doing as an organization, making sure that we are on top of using the best technology to best support our associates, while leaning our program model deeper into what we already do really well, instead of trying to become a jack of all trades or do way too much and become way too broad and unspecialized.
That's a fascinating take. And I think it's an important sort of theme in our conversation that you don't have to be an expert in AI to engage with AI. You mentioned the importance of partnerships and sort of leveraging these external networks of support that are available to nonprofits. But I want to talk a little bit about you talked about dangers. And I'm sure a lot of nonprofits who are working with marginalized communities are thinking about these dangers that come with integrating AI into your operations if you don't have a solid, sort of robust plan for responsible engagement. So in one of our initial chats, you even mentioned nonprofit hesitancy to adopt AI and how that hesitancy is particularly prevalent among nonprofits engaged in workforce development. And there's a whole range of reasons for that. So I'd love to hear from you a little bit more about how you're what those tensions are, right? And then how you're reconciling those tensions in your own work at Breaktime, and what are some of the major points of contention that you're seeing nonprofits have to overcome as they integrate AI into their own organizational journey.
Yeah, sometimes AI feels like a bad word when you're talking in certain spaces, because the reality of the history of technological advancement in the United States and across the world is that it has left people behind, and it has consistently left the same specific groups of people behind. Particularly along racial lines, particularly along socioeconomic lines. Technology has expanded wealth for populations of privilege, and it has depleted opportunity for others consistently. And so for many people who have that historical perspective, when we're seeing what's happening right now, it's hard sometimes to have hope that this will be any different or will be managed different. I like to think that we can collectively learn from our mistakes. And I like to have hope that that's going to happen here. But I think we can't just hope. We got to act, and we got to push. And the number one thing we have to do is be engaged in the conversation, and not just steer away. Because look, AI is blossoming and taking off left and right, whether we decide to protest and not use it, or whether we decide to engage in the conversation or not. But it's going to leave the people we care about and the people we support behind if we're not on top of figuring out, okay, how do we best prepare our communities for this changing world, for this changing economy, for this changing labor market? How do we best leverage these tools so that we are as advanced with our approach to everything we do as possible and are delivering the best services possible? And so I think the avoidance of AI, the avoidance of talking about AI, comes from a very valid place of, centuries and centuries of how different technologies over time have developed, in particular the last few decades of the invention of the internet and everything that has evolved and all the careers that have been wiped away because of that.
Mm.
But at the end of the day, we know that these are tools that can also harness and unlock transformative social change. But we got folks who are in that work of social change need to be in the driver's seat, need to be at the table for those conversations.
Mhm.
And that's why I'm challenging myself and through this conversation, challenging others to really approach this with the mindset of folks are going to be left more behind if we as social change leaders do not come to the table and do not offer our perspective and do not stay up to date with the technology that's evolving.
Yeah. That's an excellent point, and I think it's reasonable to say, if I'm understanding what you're saying, that nonprofits who are really working with communities who are at the front lines of some of these challenges, who want to thrive in an AI future and they need sort of viable pathways to do so, they have a bit of a responsibility to get smart on these topics fast so that they're prepared for the changes ahead. And it's a
Correct.
theme that has come up a few different times in our conversations and in this series, the importance of nonprofits not only engaging with AI, but taking a leading role in shaping the broader AI ecosystem. And from our perspective, that could include anything from sort of building tools that are uniquely suited to community needs, to leveraging AI to sort of extract insights from large data sets so that we can empower communities and change makers to advocate for better solutions and policies. But I want to hear from you, based on your own experience as a nonprofit leader, as sort of a veteran in this industry. What are the ingredients that you think an aspiring leader needs to have to shape the AI ecosystem as a responsible user or even a developer decision maker?
Yeah. So I think number one, going back to my earlier point, partnership is the number one resource that you need at your disposal as a nonprofit leader to manage this challenge. There are nonprofits who are really focused or doing a lot of work in this area that you can learn from. And there's also peers at other organizations like yours that are grappling with the same challenges, myself included. And so our collective learning is very important in our ability to not go through this alone and not try to solve this challenge in our own silos is very, very important. So I would raise up partnership as the number one way of doing that, and that includes partnership with folks in the private sector who are very abreast of what's happening, who are maybe involved in the development and scale of different AI technologies. Partnership across the board so that we understand what's happening and we understand some approaches to how our organization deals with it. And that's how we can develop some of the expertise that we need and some of the insight that we need. So partnership is the number one thing I would raise up there. And the second thing I would raise up is to my earlier point about folks are going to get left behind if we don't step up and force our way to the table. Ensuring that our commitment to our community extends into this work and is centered in this work. We are not, here to. We don't want our communities to get left behind, and so if we don't prioritize getting to that table, being part of the conversations that are happening around how AI is affecting the labor market, how can we train and support folks whose jobs might be eliminated or affected by this, then which are all areas where we have a lot of great perspective, then our communities are going to suffer for it. So, in addition to partnership, I think ensuring that we are approaching and finding ways to get to the sort of levers of power around this conversation is very important. Making sure that that our voice and ultimately the voices of our community are represented in those conversations. Because as the technological shift is occurring, jobs will be impacted, jobs will evolve, certain jobs will be eliminated or reduced, the labor market will shift. And if leaders, particularly in the workforce development space, aren't at the table for the conversations about mitigating the impact of that, aren't at the table to express how important it is to train and support people in transitioning into other careers and to preparing for that transition, mitigating the harm that this transformation can cause. The folks who are developing these technologies or scaling these technologies, their area of expertise is not workforce development. Their area of expertise is not in our communities. So we've got to bring that expertise to the table and make sure it's represented in those conversations. So the two biggest things, again, I would raise up here are partnership and making sure we find our seat at the table so that equity and the insight that we have from our communities and our work is not lost in the conversation.
Yeah. I think that's so important. That's a good point. You talked about sort of coming to the table and having sort of representation in the decisions that are made. I would argue that maybe more so than just being at the table, really shaping the agenda. We think about how loud of a voice sometimes that industry has in these conversations and how that sort of shapes our primary focus on innovation, which is critical. But when sort of community voices and civil society voices are left out, we have less of a focus on bias and representation and opportunity and community-informed development of AI, which is a real challenge that we have a responsibility to address. I want to bring it back to the spirit of partnerships. You mentioned the importance of involving industry, of becoming a partner with industry to support communities. So I wonder, for those of us who might be joining from outside the nonprofit community, perhaps from the private sector, what can technologists, industry, tech forward stakeholders who will likely be hiring this next generation of tech empowered youth learn from the nonprofit world and how they approach AI and inclusivity from an organizational standpoint?
Yeah, well, I would lead with two main points. One is that developers and implementers of this technology have the responsibility to deal with the negative consequences. I think we've seen this play out with social media and the rise of social media and some of what has happened with the congressional hearings around it and ensuring that Meta and others are held accountable for some of the effects they've had on mental health with our teens. For a long time, it was just assumed, oh, we're just a social media company. We're just a technology company. That's what we do. And if there's societal harm, that's the fault of the people who are using our technologies. But what we're starting to see is that technologies and algorithms are designed in a way that can directly create harm. So those who develop technologies and those who implement technologies are indeed responsible for the negative consequences and need to be mindful of that both in the development and then the implementation of that technology and how it's going to affect communities. So that's number one, is there is a responsibility there, and it does lie with the developers and implementers of this technology. Number two is the private sector needs to recognize that they are not experts at the work that we do in the nonprofit sector and really engage us in those conversations. Again, collaborative innovation is important to us at Breaktime, and I think it should be really a central value in this collective work to ensure that we can reduce the negative consequences of AI and harness the power of AI to drive transformative social change. Let social change leaders, let the communities they serve and their voices be at the center of conversations of how to mitigate the harm of these technologies, how to harness these technologies to support these communities. If you just try to solve these challenges on your own, and that's not your area of expertise, if workforce development's not your area of expertise, then you're not going to do the best job you possibly can. So bring in the specialists who know what they're talking about, just as I will bring in the specialists who know they're talking about when they talk about AI, to ensure that I'm best educated on that subject. So it's really got to be a group effort, and the responsibility really, it starts with the companies that are developing and implementing this technology, to ensure that they're mindful of the effects this can have. And one specific thing that I would raise up, that kind of relates to these points, is for any technology that you're developing, you're putting out there, when you think about how to train people up to use that technology, when you think about how to um, train people up to get jobs that harness that technology, think about those who are most often left behind first, because one of the things we grapple with at Breaktime is, you know, we'll hear, oh, well, there's a free online training program for this technology. Well, a young person at Breaktime, and we call our program participants associates, an associate at Breaktime who's 21 and has 2 kids and is struggling with housing, is not going to have the time to do that free online training program. You've got to meet them where they're at. You've got to provide paid training opportunities. You've got to partner with nonprofits to ensure that these types of trainings can be implemented into the programming they're already doing. Just putting a training out on your website isn't going to get to the people who are most often left behind. So ensuring that those people are included in the conversation, they're centered in the strategy, is really important. And young people experiencing housing insecurity are really towards the top of that list. They're folks who most often are not thought of when workforce development strategies are implemented. Um, and that's something that, again, through partnership, we can figure out together. But that focus on those most often left behind has to be at the center of the solution.
That's a great point. And I want to dive into that further. I'll give a quick plug to invite audience members to start sharing their questions in the chat. We would love to get to those very shortly, but I have a couple more questions left for you, Connor. You mentioned, thinking about those who are left behind and often excluded from the benefits, often marginalized from the benefits of technology. And I think, we try to take a very positive approach. There is great potential to AI, but we can't talk about that potential or harness that potential until we deal with the harms that are ongoing or may occur in the future. So I understand that you work with populations who often experience levels of marginalization, right? So there's the individual experience of being unhoused, which is a type of marginalization, but there's also the systemic and societal level marginalization that is experienced by entire communities based on their sexual orientation, their race, their gender, religion, ethnicity, beyond. And I want to ask you how you're sort of tackling these levels of marginalization and providing the best service that you can to these populations who have good reason to fear or mistrust technology.
Yeah, absolutely. So just for a little background on the population we serve, again, 18 to 24-year-olds experiencing housing insecurity. 89% of these young people, at least in our program, identify as people of color. Over 30% identify as LGBTQ plus in our program. Around a third are coming out of the foster care system. There are many layers to a number of intersectional identities and backgrounds that commonly show up in this population. And these are communities that are being disproportionately affected by basically every issue. But the negative consequences of technological change are definitely on that list as well. And so our ability to advocate for and center our strategy around equity and supporting those who are most often marginalized or left behind is central to everything we do at Breaktime. And the number one way we achieve impact in that area is by paying our young adults for all the training they do. That's what makes it accessible. I think, as a student of applied math and economics, one of the first things you learn is that everything has an opportunity cost. There's financial cost. If you go and you buy a candy bar at a store, you're gonna pay money. But everything also has opportunity costs. You could have done something else with that money. You could have done something else with that time. And when you are experiencing housing insecurity, when you have so much on your plate, so much to figure out, every second of your time has a high opportunity cost. So free trainings that are going to support your long-term success are not an option when you're trying to figure out where to sleep and where to stay tonight, especially for our young people who are parenting, who are doing that times 2 or 3 to figure out for their children too what their situation is. You can't ask a single mom with a young girl to choose between a free training program and getting food in the mouth of her daughter that night. That's not a choice that person can make. And so we have to compensate people like that for these types of trainings to remove that opportunity cost. So one of the things we've done at Breaktime is we have this incredible collaboration with a high set partner or high school equivalency test. So they support folks in completing the examinations they need to graduate high school and have high school credentials. That's incredibly important to getting many jobs and it's almost essential to getting any kind of family sustaining job. And we pay young adults $20 an hour to engage in those trainings. So that there's not that trade-off. There's not that opportunity cost. They can actually invest in that opportunity and get food on the table for their daughter and get a roof over their head. Empowering folks with the financial resources they need to feel stable allows them to invest time in the things that will support them in the long term. But you can't make those investments in your long-term success when your short-term needs far outweigh your ability to invest anything in your long-term future. So we have to make training accessible to the populations that are most often left behind and excluded, including communities of color, including young people coming from the foster care system, including LGBTQ plus young people, housing insecure young people. These communities need to also receive financial resources, stipends, wages, in order to actually be able to take advantage of these opportunities. We invest in the financial success of our young people in other ways as well. We have a match savings program. We have emergency financial support through our Breaktime Community Fund. And we're always innovating new ways to get money in the hands of our young people, because that's what enables them with the choice to say, oh, I want to do this training program, and I can because doing it doesn't prevent me from having food today. Doing it doesn't prevent me from having housing. Doing it doesn't prevent me from supporting my children. And so that's, I think, the biggest thing I would raise up in this conversation is, in order to support those who are most often marginalized and left behind, we have to invest resources in supporting them financially, as well as offering a free training program, because that's what makes it accessible and compensates them for the high opportunity costs of their time.
That's wonderful. Thank you for that background. And I think it gets back to this idea of how do we create sort of a community-informed AI strategy. And I think you and your work at Breaktime really emphasizes the importance of understanding what are some of the challenges and needs that these communities are facing. How can we make sure that they have the choice to show up in the way that works best for them, that allows them to feel free enough to let their vision and creativity shine in their own work without having to worry about, am I going to be able to feed my family, or am I going to have a place to sleep tonight? These are all super important considerations. And I'm glad that Breaktime is sort of providing a model for how we can create more community-informed support within nonprofits. I do want to sort of bring it back before we get to the audience questions. I promise we're going to get to those. But given that we've talked about the harms, I do want to shift over to the positive side of opportunities that AI is presenting. Particularly to support communities that have felt this lack of inclusion or belonging in the workplace. I'm curious, from your standpoint, Connor, are there any stories of potential that you're excited about when it comes to AI and how it can amplify the needs and aspirations of marginalized identities?
Yeah, so I'll give 2 examples. One is sort of a a systems level example, and then one's more specific to a success story on my team and at Breaktime.
Okay.
At a systems level, um, ever since I started studying this issue and the opportunities that AI presents for transformative social change when I was in undergrad, um, I have seen a lot of exciting examples of how AI can be used to improve our understanding of both the problems that our communities are facing and the solutions that work
Mm,
to advance them towards success. Um, the ability of AI to help us in doing that is really, really transformative if it can be harnessed in the right way to ensure that one, we know concretely what the problems we're working on are, because sometimes it's really hard to diagnose exactly, you know, I understand that this issue exists in my community, but why is it happening? What are the things driving this? And AI and machine learning in particular can be used to really help with that data analysis. But then on the solutions side, looking at what's working, looking at the impact
mm,
that a program is having. Um, AI and other technologies can and have been utilized to improve our ability to assess what's working and then be able to scale that. And so, on a systems level, I think the implications of the AI revolution when it comes to the data we have is the number one thing that I'm excited about, and that I've continued to see countless examples of really exciting things happening because we have a better understanding of the problem and we have a better understanding of what solutions are working. So that's the number one thing I want to emphasize. In terms of my specific team, I'll share just a quick example. Someone on our program staff working directly with young adults came to me. And one of the things that we're working on is really codifying our program model, ensuring that we have standard operating procedures that are more specific and allow basically anyone who's coming onto the team to very quickly understand exactly how to implement every aspect of our curriculum and our program and our wraparound supports. And so this individual said to me, they said, we developed these standard operating procedures, but we didn't know if they worked. Like, we didn't know if they made sense. They made sense to us, but we're experts in getting this done. So we didn't know if it would make sense to a new person on the team. We didn't know if it makes sense to a random individual who didn't know about our work. And they used Chat GPT actually to test the SOP and to feed that information into that AI system and see how good of a job it did when it was asked questions based on the standard operating procedure. Like, how would you go about doing X, Y, and Z based on the SOP? And they saw gaps where the system was not understanding certain pieces because they weren't well written or they weren't included. They started to see that there were specific areas where the approach that the system said it would take to solving a certain issue was not exactly what they were hoping for when they wrote the SOP. So they used it to refine the standard operating procedures that they're now using to directly support our young adults. So I think on a back end, AI has a powerful way of empowering our staff to have better resources at their disposal, easier
mm,
to test and iterate resources at their disposal, um, that will make their work easier, more replicable, and more successful. And so if AI is harnessed in the right way, we can have better data that will better inform our work, and we can have better systems and standard operating procedures that will make each of our jobs easier and more successful.
mm. That's awesome. And I think, it's getting to the point where AI is not a tool that should be used to replace humans, but rather empower them and enable them to spend time on or spend less time on the more tedious tasks and more time on the direct community service, the support, the
Yes.
creativity, the envisioning of new systems and a better future, right? So that's wonderful. Thank you for sharing those examples. I think I'll get into the questions now. We have a few questions trickling in the chat. So I'll start with Connor. Do you find that most Nonprofit organizations are made up of specialized employees that are case managers, therapists, etc., that do not tend to utilize new technology but have set ways to execute their jobs. How do you educate them on AI technology that could enhance their jobs and benefit their clients?
Yeah, there are many direct service roles that are incredibly demanding of people's time and energy. Working directly with populations that are facing significant challenges is stressful work, is energy consuming work. And if you're trying to learn new technologies and do a million other things on top of that, it's a lot to ask of someone. And so I think what's important is that in order to allow people to learn and adapt to new technologies, we need to structure their roles and give them the flexibility to have the time and energy to do those things. I think a lot of case managers end up with such a large caseload that they don't even have time to take a break for lunch, or they don't even have time to to breathe in between sessions. And so at break time, we've really prioritized keeping each individual's caseload, the young people they're working with, to a smaller subset of individuals so they can provide more individualized and specialized support to each of those individuals, while ideally having more time and flexibility to work on other things, such as learning about new technologies that we're implementing at break time, attending all staff meetings where we're talking about these things, working with their colleagues on the operations team who are responsible for the technologies that we use at break time. So I think it all comes back to just how you treat your workforce, and particularly how you treat and support and empower your direct service staff. And at break time, we're challenging ourselves to structure those roles in a way that allows people to be successful, allows people to be happy and balanced, both in and outside of work, and to have the time and capacity to invest in the important work of learning and adapting to new technologies, which isn't possible if you're going from meeting to meeting all day with associates or with clients who have their own demands of your time and have their own demands of your energy.
I think we could have a whole episode on burnout in nonprofits and how AI can either help or, not help that sort of context. But that's for another day. I actually want to pull on this thread that we started to discuss in our conversation, but it's a great question that somebody introduced in the chat. Some of our most marginalized communities, including racial minorities, are understandably cautious about tech applications, including AI. Can you share any examples of where you've built trust among communities over time?
Yeah, I think for me, most of the trust building I do is with my own team and with my own staff. And it's tough because, again, as I mentioned earlier, our history does not make us feel hopeful about this. Like there's countless examples you can point to, even well before the internet, of every technological revolution, every technological advance that we've gone through. There's been negative consequences that are almost always most fervently felt by the same communities, particularly those who are people of color, particularly those who are of a lower socioeconomic status. And so it's very disgruntling and understandably creates a huge degree of mistrust. When we look at the advances that are happening with, camera technology, for example, and being able to track faces and all of these things, we're already seeing examples of how it is enhancing or amplifying racial profiling, how it is perpetuating systemic inequities. And so these types of examples make it really scary for people to embrace this technology. But the way that I look at it and the way I try to approach this with my staff or anyone I talk to is that all of that is 100% true and will not change if we don't step up and figure out this technology and be part of the conversation. As I was saying earlier, if we're not at the table, that expertise and perspective on the history of how technology has been used to amplify racial disparities disparities, social economic disparities, that will not be part of this next wave of technological revolution. Equity will not be centered in the conversation. So we do have to step up. We have to step up on behalf of our communities, on behalf of those most often disproportionately affected by this. But we have to be part of the conversation. We can't just leave the room and slam the door, because technology will move on without us. You can't protest your way out of technological change, unfortunately. And fortunately, if you are part of the conversation, as we've discussed, you can actually harness it to do a ton of good, make the jobs of your staff easier and more manageable, and amplify the impact of what you do. So I think entering the room, being part of the conversation as a nonprofit leader, I feel that's an incumbent role that I have. And staying in that room, even when it gets hard and frustrating, and bringing that perspective is what's so important for us to do, to ensure that we can hopefully make the future of technological change an amplifier of social good, not an amplifier of increased social disparity.
Mm-hmm. I think you're definitely speaking the language that we speak here at PJMF, where even in the situations where we can't deny the harms that AI causes, it does force us to take a look at some of the fundamental systems and structures that we've either openly or tacitly accepted in
Yeah.
life. And who should have access to certain tools, who should be involved in designing these tools, who should benefit from the applications of AI, right? And who is not benefiting. How do we sort of come together and answer those questions in a way that is reflective of the needs and concerns and aspirations of the communities that we support? And that's such a critical point. So thank you for bringing that up, and thank you for the question as well. A couple more questions I think we have time for. So I'll start with Connor, can you share the names of nonprofits who are leading on AI implementation and advocacy? And before I turn it over to you, let me say that if you have more names to add, the chat will remain open after this conversation is finished. So you're welcome to sort of share more as you come by them.
Yeah, I'll just share one, and I hope that others um, can share more. But Europe is a workforce development organization we've done a lot of work with. They're constantly creating new hard skills training programs to prepare opportunity youth, or youth who are not in school and not working, with opportunities to get high income jobs or medium income jobs that are going to help them sustain their families. And they're adding industry tracks that I think are really unique in the technological space. And so that's one workforce development nonprofit I see responding to this directly, and finding opportunities for young people that respond to the technological revolution. Countless others I could discuss, but given time, I'll move on to the next question for now.
Awesome. Thank you for that. This is an interesting one, and I think an important topic in the area of workforce development. So, this individual asked, can you talk about the role of mentorship in workforce development? How can aspiring mentors who may not have as much knowledge about tech or AI support young people who are entering a drastically different labor market?
Yeah, this is a great question. Briefly, I would say mentorship is critical. When I think about my own personal experience, or the experience of the associates in my program, the experience of my friends and family, getting to see someone who's charted a career that's similar to the one that you want, or has navigated challenges similar to the ones that you're navigating, is the most insightful and impactful type of conversation you can have. What's challenging is, with that experience comes lots of knowledge, but sometimes not as up to date of a knowledge of the new technologies that you might learn about when you're in school, but as you get deeper into a career, you're not as exposed to as much. So sometimes there is that divide, and I think um, my like main point here would just be the way we approach like mentorship at Breaktime is trying to help build a community of support around individuals so they can get different things from different people. The person I would go to talk to about AI and its impact on our work and how we can leverage it more is different than the person I'm going to give me advice on how I become a better nonprofit leader is different than the person I'm going to for advice on how I create more work-life balance. There's no one perfect mentor for every single individual. And so we're supporting our young people and building the skills they need to network and build relationships with multiple individuals who can collectively provide the mentorship they need to navigate the workforce from a number of different angles.
I love that. A network of mentors. I think we often just think about having one really good mentor, but having a network of mentors sounds like such a rich opportunity. Anyways, I do want to get to sort of a call to action. We're coming to the end of our time together. But I want to give the last word to you, Connor, to share, if you could, one call of action when it comes to either AI or inclusion in the workplace, or preferably both. What would that call to action be?
Yeah. So, sort of summarizing a lot of what I've talked about today, I would say my call to action to anyone on this call, whether you're in the nonprofit world, the private sector, whether you're retired, wherever you are in your life, whether you're a young person who's struggling to find employment, lean into conversations when AI comes up. I think very commonly I hear people immediately just say, at least in the circles that I'm running in, immediately kind of tense and kind of just say yuck when they hear AI and not want to talk about it. There's a lot of negative connotation, right? Because of the history of technological advancement creating social disparities. But I encourage people to lean in and embrace the conversation, because if you're not part of the conversation, that perspective is not going to be there and is not going to influence the overall dialogue and the overall arc of this journey and this technological revolution and how it empowers or impedes positive social change. So that's, I think, the most general advice I would give is, and a call to action for myself as well, is when I hear AI, to lean into the conversation instead of avoiding it, instead of blocking it, instead of shutting the door. In terms of inclusion in the workplace, I encourage everyone to reflect on what I shared earlier about compensating folks for the opportunity cost of their time. And depending where you're coming from, what your role is, what your work is, that kind of that point might resonate differently and might result in a different call to action. But I think it's a concept I really want people to think about, because it's not the traditional way of thinking about things. We thought a lot about, we can make school free for certain people, but that doesn't account for the opportunity cost of their time and the challenges that those folks, and the trade-off that they have to say, well, I'd rather work an hourly job than not have income and not be able to afford food or housing. And so how do we remove that choice, that impossible, frustrating, infuriating choice for people? Well, we have to empower them with financial resources, and we have to compensate them for that opportunity cost. So that concept of paying people to do training programs, paying people to get engaged in an educational program, definitely paying people for internships and work opportunities. However that could show up in your life and work, I encourage you to lean into it, or to just reflect and share with others more and talk with others more about that concept of compensating people for the opportunity cost of their time, particularly paying people who are most often left behind.
That's an excellent point. Thank you, Connor. Couldn't end it on a better point. Thank you again for all of your incredible insights today, and just your overall dedication to a world where AI is really built and deployed in service of communities, with communities and change makers like you in the driver's seat. So thank you to our audience as well. We really appreciate you tuning in today, and we look forward to seeing you next time. Bye, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.